Just want to let everyone know I did create an Instagram account recently. It seems fun. I'll probably just use it for more onesie and RuneScape related pictures. You can check it out in the description at AndrewAJT1, and I'll probably be following most people back like I do on Twitter. Thank you so very much to the Patreon sponsors for today, RS Farmer Bob, Tepanda, and our new patron, Brock the Serb. Their support helps make these videos possible. Hello everyone, my name is Andrew AJT, and welcome to a little OSRS vlog. If you've never seen me do one of these, I do them every few months usually. They're just a little bit more open-ended where I can talk about a bunch of different topics without necessarily spending a whole video on each of them. So something that I've been thinking a lot about is, should OldSchool RuneScape have a Completionist Cape, which it does not currently, and this was something from Pre EoC. There's been a lot of imported content from Pre EoC, even in slightly different forms. For example, we have basically the equivalent of Ivy with redwood trees, and they're even talking about some direct ports like Soul Wars could be added to OldSchool in pretty much a similar fashion. So right now we just have the Max Cape, which is not the same thing whatsoever. There is a Max Cape in Pre EoC as well, and this is basically something you can buy once you get 99 and everything, but there really isn't any additional requirements. There's no quest requirement or really much else other than 99 in every skill, which by the time you do that, you'll probably have a lot of those requirements done, but there's nothing really proving that you have it. And by the way, the Max Cape is actually quite good as a cape. Like, it literally is good. It's not just cosmetic. The stats are just a normal trimmed skill cape, but it also gives you the Holy Wrench effect. It gives you rapid heal. It reduces your weight. It can restore run energy. It can save you inventory with things like the grapple thing at Arma. So it actually is genuinely a very useful and a very powerful cape, I would have to say. It's really the only thing I didn't have for the Inferno that would have been a massive help. I do plan to get one someday. Right now I'm 2,191 total, so that may seem pretty close, but I also have rune crafting and mining and agility to do, so that's going to be a lot of hours. So I did a poll about the Completionist Cape, and when I did this poll on the community tab, which is still up by the way, I didn't really have an opinion on the Completionist Cape. I wasn't really someone saying, oh yeah, we definitely need it in the game, or no way, I don't want it. I was curious to hear what people had to say, and also just how they felt about it, and around 70% of people actually supported it, which surprised me. I thought it was going to be around 50-50, so I was very surprised to see that high of a percent of people voting in the poll wanting it. So to go back to the timeline for a second, the Completionist Cape was released in Pre EoC in 2011, and this had some additional requirements over the 99 in every skill. For example, you needed the quests and diaries, or the tasks at the time done. There's a whole laundry list of requirements that I'll link down below in the wiki, but there were other things. For example, the fight kiln had to be completed, which was the equivalent of the Inferno back then. Although that was quite a bit easier than the Inferno in my experience, but presumably if the Completionist Cape was to come to OldSchool, the Inferno would be a requirement if we were to be consistent. Now, the Completionist Cape was mostly a cosmetic upgrade from the Max Cape, but they also had a trimmed version, and this had some like really miscellaneous requirements that took a lot of time. For example, you had to hunt 4,000 chompy birds, you had to beat all the champion challenges, mini quests, you had to have a certain White Knight rank, you also had to do this pretty ridiculous requirement. You had to play 5,000 Castle Wars games, which I just thought at the time was so ridiculous. I mean, no one's actually going to play actively 5,000, so what people would do is just sit in the Castle Wars game and not really play, and just AFK it for like months on end. I thought that was really dumb, and a lot of people did as well, and they actually reduced the requirement a bit in 2013. I think you just needed like a set from the rewards, which was a little bit more reasonable, and I wasn't aware of this till recently. In 2019 they removed that requirement altogether, which is probably for the best. I mean, I love Castle Wars, but that's a lot of Castle Wars games to be playing. Now that I've heard what everyone had to say, I am actually in favor of a Completionist Cape now. I think it would be a nice addition, even if they did have a trimmed version as well. Now, in the comments, some people had some pretty good points. For example, one person pointed out that we really shouldn't have those ridiculous requirements like the Castle Wars one, and probably in hindsight Jagex will know not to include that. Now, I'm not trying to hate on Castle Wars because it is one of my favorite minigames, and maybe some sort of requirement wouldn't actually be too bad. Maybe if you just had to get like the first decorative armor, the red and blue one, that would be pretty reasonable and encourage more people to play the game actively. The reason I think we should have one is because we already have a lot of incentives to do these weird challenges in the game. For example, you can get a cape now for having all the music unlocked, and You can also get one for having all the champions defeated, so if we're going to encourage people to do those things, we might as well have a reward for completing every one of them. Someone also pointed out that it would be really difficult to determine the exact requirements for it. I could see this being a big issue with the trimmed one in particular. For example, should you have to have everything on the collection log? Well, it is a completionist thing, it is unlockable, it does mark it as checked, so should it be completed? Obviously, I don't think you should be required to do that because that would be such a ridiculous requirement, but it is interesting to think about where should the line be drawn. You guys would probably have better ideas than I do as to what should be included and what not, so let me know if you have them. Now, I did some research because obviously I'm not the first person to ask this question if we should have a Completionist Cape or not, and Mod Bruno actually made a list of completionist items back a couple years ago, and this would basically be for a POH feature where you could show all your completionist goals. Now, the thing that I found puzzling is even though you would have this big list of achievements in your POH, there wouldn't necessarily be a cape to go along with it, based on what I found. From the impression I got looking at these old posts, it didn't seem like there was any plans to release one, which I disagree with because if you're gonna do all these things and have this huge list of accomplishments, having just a POH thing would be kind of a lame reward for that. Now, it's possible their opinions or plans have changed because this was a while ago, although it seems like the impression I'm getting now is that they're not necessarily for it or against it overall at Jagex, but maybe they're just kind of indifferent to it right now, and they're focusing on other projects, which is fair if that's the case. I could be wrong though, so if any JMod wants to comment on this and clarify or give an update, I'd be interested to hear it. I do find that many people who max out on Old School tend to be bored of the game relatively soon after, so maybe having a new challenge would be a good thing for them. Also, just because we're on the topic, one thing I don't understand is why so many people complain about the Fire Max Cape and actually want it removed from the game. From what I can gather, I guess it is dumb that you can combine the Max Cape with a Fire Cape, which is no longer best in slot, but obviously that's just the case because the Infernal Cape wasn't out yet, and I don't see why it has to be removed. I mean, yeah, it does look silly maybe, but if people enjoy it, I don't really see the problem with it. And who knows, maybe someone can't do the Inferno for a variety of reasons and they like the Fire Cape version. I don't really see a problem with that, so maybe it's just kind of a meme, but if there's other reasons for it, definitely let me know because I just don't understand it. So I actually thought of a really cool idea recently from a dream I had. So this dream was basically I was doing a Jad task with melee, and for some reason I had a Divine Spirit Shield, which obviously isn't in the game. And when I got to Jad, suddenly a Cerberus spawned as well, and it was like really intense. I was fighting both of them, prey flicking like crazy, running around, walking under them. It was like this really fun and intense dream. I don't know if you guys ever dream about RuneScape, I very rarely do, but this was one time I did and it was just like super fun. So this got me thinking, why don't we have a sandbox mode in RuneScape? This would be so perfect. For example, what if you wanted to fight Jad and Corp at the same time? Or what if you wanted to pit bosses against each other and, say for example, have Jad fight Armadillo and see who would win? Or how many goblins would it take to defeat one Jad if you could spawn as many as you want? The way I'm imagining this is almost like a Gary's Mod sandbox type of game where you can just do whatever you want. And obviously this would be a separate server, nothing would be saved, you don't make progress on it. And you could just do literally whatever you want. If you want to put your strength level at 500 and see what you can do, like, that would just be such a cool thing to mess around with. I remember they did something like this in Pre EoC. They tried to find out how many roosters it would take to kill one Jad, and it took over 5,000. But other than that, we don't see NPC versus NPC combat really utilized that much. You can see it in like the God Wars dungeon and some quests and maybe some other examples, but overall, it probably has so much untapped potential for fun in this game, and I think a sandbox server would be a really good way to implement it. I don't even see too many problems with it. The only ones that I can think of would be maybe if you could spawn bosses, it would be kind of unfair because you could practice against them, although maybe you could have it where you only unlock them when you defeat them in the real game, and maybe some people would play it too much and lose interest in the regular game because you could just set whatever you want in the sandbox version, but it would be very clear that everything would be erased every time you log off. I guess the closest thing we have right now to a RuneScape sandbox mode would be the Nightmare Zone, where you can fight old quest bosses as much as you want. Unfortunately, these are just not very interesting bosses for the most part, and it's kind of turned into a place for training rather than fun. I mean, how many people actually play the Nightmare Zone for fun rather than just to grind XP? It was really one of the first pieces of new content in Old School RuneScape, so it could probably use an update anyway, even if they weren't going to expand on it that far. It could easily use some more environments or challenges or maybe restrictions and power-ups. That would be a good place to start, I think. But anyways, let me know in the comments what you think about my Sandbox server and Completionist Cape ideas. I'm sure you guys will have a lot to add. Make sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed and sub with bell notifications if you haven't already. I upload every Tuesday. You can join my clan chat in game, AndrewAJT62. You can also join our Discord down below. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram down below. If you haven't seen my top 10 capes video, that'll be in the end screen as well. I recommend seeing that. My Patreon page is linked there as well if you want to support the channel even further. And I will see you all next week. Take care, everyone.